which include revisions to the microbial standard for water directly applied during growing, which is going to follow the EPA recreational water criteria. Water that does not initially meet standards would have other options, such as set a watering interval based on microbial die-off. And also recognizing that different water sources have different risks, the FDA is trying to create a less burdensome approach to testing. For the proposed changes to the food safety rule, we also are looking at the further study for the manure strategy. The FDA has decided that they would remove the proposed 9-month minimum application time interval now, and will defer the decision on that until they've done further study and have scientific evidence to support the policy. For now, they're saying that the USDA's National Organic Program Standard is okay to be used, and that standard states that there's a 120-day application interval between raw manure and crops in contact with the soil and a 90-day interval for crops that are not in contact with the soil. They've also eliminated the 45-day minimum application interval for compost. The third thing that they've changed is a better definition of the covered farms. A farm is no longer required to register as a food facility simply because they pack and hold raw product. Those facilities that are handling the product are subject to the produce safety rule instead of the preventive controls for human food. Farms and mixed farm facilities with an average annual produce sales of less than $25,000 are exempt, and the proposed changes to definitions of small and small businesses is to change the measurement from based on all food sales to being based on produce sales. And that dollar threshold for the qualified exemption is not going to change because it's defined in the FSMA statute. That states that if you are under $500,000 in annual food sales and a majority of the sales go to qualified end users within a 275-mile radius, you are exempt from this rule. Last thing is defining the withdrawal of qualified exemptions, and basically establishes procedures for the FDA to withdraw an exemption due to food safety reasons. And when that happens, the FDA wants to ensure that public health is taken care of, and prior to withdraw, they would issue either a warning letter, a recall, do administrative detention, do seizure, or have an injunction. The second thing is that the FDA must notify the farm of the circumstances that are putting them in jeopardy of losing their exemption, and they must provide the farm an opportunity to respond and also consider the actions taken by that farm to address those issues. They also are going to provide procedures to reinstate a withdrawn exemption. So let's look at the compliance dates. Very small farms defined as $25,000 to $250,000 in annual sales would be 4 years after going into effect. The small businesses, $250,000 to $500,000 in annual produce sales would be 3 years, and all other farms would be 2 years. The compliance dates for the water quality standards and related testing and record keeping would come into place 2 years after the compliance dates for the rest of the rules. The comment period on this is open until December 15th, 2015. Moving on to the proposed preventive controls for human food. Farms, again, that pack or hold food are not subject to the preventive control rule. Again, the packing and holding is viewed as a farming activity, and therefore those facilities are subject to the produce safety rule. Farms that are doing processing or manufacturing may be subjected to the preventive controls rule. Also, a change in the definition to a very small farm to be less than $1 million in sales of human food, and that would be adjusted for inflation. They've also done a further clarification on withdrawal for qualified exemptions to establish a procedure to guide the FDA in withdrawing an exemption for food safety reasons, and that the FDA may consider alternatives to ensure public health and provide advance notification to that facility, as we saw before, as well as providing them an opportunity to respond prior to that withdrawal. The FDA has also said that they will extend an additional 60 days after the receipt of order for the facility who has an exemption withdrawn to comply with the full requirements for a hazard analysis and a risk-based preventive control program. Again, moving on to the product testing, environmental monitoring, and supply controls. While it's in the preamble, it's not currently in the regulatory text, and the FDA is looking for comments on specific language regarding facility product testing, which would be prior to shipment, and also facility environmental testing to verify that the controls are in place if contamination of a ready-to-eat food is a significant hazard. Supplier controls are proposed when the receiving facility's hazard analysis identifies significant hazard for the raw product or ingredient, and that hazard is controlled prior to receipt. The facility could determine appropriate verification activities unless there's a reasonable probability that exposure to the hazard will result in illness or death to humans. Those verification activities include on-site audit, sampling, and testing, and the key here is the assurance that the hazards are being controlled. If we look at the preventive controls for human food revisions, there's also a proposed section on economically motivated adulteration of food, and they're basically asking if this should be included within this proposed regulation. Compliance dates, again, very small businesses with less than $1 million in annual sales of human foods would be 3 years. Small businesses with under 500 employees that are not qualified for an exemption would be 2 years, and all other facilities would be 1 year. The comment period closes on December 13th, and the FDA is continuing to review comments on the original proposed rule, which closed in November of 2013. If we look at the proposed rules on the foreign supplier verifications. First of all, from a hazard analysis, they're looking for a more comprehensive evaluation of the food that's being imported and the supplier risks. That includes that the importer must do a compliance status review, make sure that they are in compliance with the current standards, as well as they must analyze the hazards of each food that they import. Factors to be considered would be the nature of the hazard in that food, the company that's actually applying the hazard controls, that supplier's procedures, processes, and practices for food safety, and the compliance with applicable U.S. food safety regulations, as well as the supplier's food safety performance history. And again, the FDA is looking for comments on whether they should include language that would talk about intentionally introduced hazards as a factor for economic gain. If we look at the supplier verification, they're looking at a hybrid approach where if there's a reasonable probability that exists for harm to humans, then there would be an annual on-site audit required unless the facility can show that they have verification activities that would allow them to have less frequent auditing and they can provide adequate assurances that the hazards are controlled. The importer needs to determine the verification activity-specific options, which again could include on-site audits, sampling, testing, review of the supplier's food safety records, and other appropriate methods. When there's a reason to believe that the hazard may cause serious injury or death, a rigorous verification standard is required in the form of an annual supplier audit, and the importers would be allowed to use a different approach if they can establish that it will provide the adequate protection to control the hazard. If we look at the other changes to make it consistent with other proposed FSMA rules, to make sure it's consistent with both the preventive controls for human food and for animal food. There's also a change in the definition of very small importer to less than $1 million in sales, and they also deem that an importing food facility, if it's in compliance with other supplier verification programs that may be included in the preventive controls rules and is compliant with any parallel foreign supplier verification program requirements, they could accept that to avoid duplicative regulation. Compliance dates for the foreign supplier verification program is 18 months after the publication of the final regulations, and for imported food that is subject to preventive controls and the produce safety rules, those dates will vary by the size of company and follow the dates to those rules. The importer must comply with the foreign supplier verification program rules 6 months after compliance with the preventive rules and the produce safety rules. Comment period is open until January 26, 2015. Last rule we're looking at today is the proposed changes to preventive controls for animal food. And basically they're looking to the current GAP or good manufacturing practices, and to make those more applicable to animal foods, they're defining small businesses as less than 2.5 million in sales of animal foods, and again, a withdraw of qualified exemption process is being developed. And also they're looking at potential language on product testing, environmental monitoring, and supplier controls, as well as language on economically motivated adulteration. The FDA does request comment also on feed mills associated with a vertically integrated farming operation, and specifically should they be subject to register as a food facility under Section 415 of the existing Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Compliance dates for the animal foods is very small. Under 2.5 million in annual sales would be 3 years, and small businesses would be 2 years, and all other facilities would be 1 year. Again, the comment period is open until December 13th, 2014, and the FDA continues to review comments on the original proposed rules, which closed in March of 2014. Now let's look at the PTI retailers that are currently requiring traceability labeling. That would start out with Walmart, would include Whole Foods, Publix, Stater Brothers, Delhaize, and Food Lion, and there's others that are pending. So the requirements themselves is that each case must include a label that has the G10 on it, which identifies both the brand owner and the pack style, as well as the lot number on it, which is the lot or batch number of that particular group of food. Also, other requirement is the PTI voice pick code, which is used by voice-activated systems, and we'll shift our attention now to the hybrid pallet tag. That requires the company name, the case information, one barcode for each combination of G10 and lot numbers. You need to have the number of labels for that pallet, and the SSCC, which is used for the advanced ship notification on the bottom as well. The elements of the traceability system include the software, which is the database that stores the G10s, the traceability information, and the customer information, the capability to do the printing systems, to design and edit labels, as well as manage the printing, and optionally inventory systems to manage stock locations, validate order fulfillment, and set availability. The hardware that's involved is barcode printers, barcode scanners, and the labels are for both cases and pallets, and there will be different materials for different use cases. So how do you get the best fit for your company? First of all, scope your needs. Figure out which customers require you to do traceability labeling today, and what percentage of your business do they represent. By having a traceability system and good food safety, will that help you secure new business? And then look at the known hazards for your commodities. If you're involved in leafy greens, tomatoes, cantaloupes, green onions, or something else that has frequent recalls, you're going to want to look at your risk tolerance. Decide if you're going to integrate with your accounting system or run it standalone, and the questions that are involved in that are shown here. In choosing your traceability partner, figure out, do they specialize in produce? Do they have products that fit your needs today? And do they have options for you to grow and expand as the traceability requirements continue to grow? And also, can they help you with your labels? So some of the key resources that I used today in this webinar was, first of all, the FDA FSMA site, and I've put the link here. Also the PTI's official website for best practices, the milestones, PTI updates, etc. And then GS1, which is where you get your company prefix. And lastly, RedLine Solutions. We have a resource center and also a new book, Produce Traceability for Dummies. So the net is the FDA has revised the proposed FSMA regulations. They're currently open for comment, and now is your time that if you have a comment to place them either directly through the site or with the trade association that you work with. FSMA regulations and compliance dates will vary by size and type of company, but all 4 of the regulations reviewed today will be finalized by the end of October 2015 and become effective in January 2016. RedLine Solutions offers scalable solutions for produce traceability and inventory control. if you'd like to work with us, give us a call or shoot us an email, and we'd be happy to work with you on this. Lastly, if you're interested, you can come to our website and get a free copy of the Produce Traceabilities for Dummies book that should help provide a good foundation on what's required, as well as talk about how you do it and how you can reduce your risks and actually have traceability save you money. And with that, that concludes our webinar for today.